Well, welcome back to Fantastic Fest 2013. We're here with Ty West and AJ Bowen for The Sacrament, which is one of those big buzz movies at Fantastic Fest, and unexpected too. We didn't know that we were going to see this one here.
Yeah, I think it was a great last-minute addition. I couldn't imagine not being here. I was telling everybody that when we were making this movie and we were on set, I was like, in a perfect world, we premiere at Venice and then go to Toronto and then US premiere at Fantastic Fest. And I was like, but really, I'll just take one of those if we were lucky. And we did all three. So it's a really unique situation, and what you hope for actually kind of came true. So yeah, I couldn't imagine not being here, and we had such a warm reception last night. It's been great.
Yeah, and what is it like to kind of come into, I mean, Fantastic Fest is kind of like a sort of a home base even for you. So it's got to be nice to come into such a warm reception too, because, you know, Toronto or Venice, you never know.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly started my career in Austin, you know, at South by and Fantastic Fest and whatnot, so it's a good place for me, I think, to a certain degree, and I always love coming here, and yeah, it was just like, it's just awesome. It's exciting to be back here. It's exciting. I mean, Tim League is one of the great champions of just independent film or film in general and what he does here, and I think Fantastic Fest is a great example of that, so it feels good to be here. Good.
Yeah, that's great. And this film is very striking. Like I said, it just stays with you. And I think you said in Toronto that it's based in part at least of the Jonestown massacre, and that's something that's, you know, you can't really get out of your head once you know about it. And is that something you've always been kind of, I hate to use the word fascinated by, but interested?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think mostly because I think that, you know, the idea of people think about Jonestown, I think like drink the Kool-Aid, right? It's become like a buzzword. And I don't think people really know that much about People's Temple and what actually happened that led to drinking the Kool-Aid. And I think what did is really fascinating and very interesting and very complicated. And I think a lot of it is relevant to today, just like what was relevant in the 60s and 70s, I think is relevant today. And so that's why I wanted to sort of make a movie that sort of explored or confronted some of those issues. And I think that you know, the goal with the movie is that it should stick with you. It should be a movie that you know talk about afterwards, and you're not sure maybe how you feel, or you and somebody else have a difference of opinion on what you feel makes a cult, or what the people who are part of a cult, like, are they crazy people, or are they not crazy people, are they manipulated, are they evil, and there's so many blurred lines there. I think that all that stuff is very fascinating and should be discussed.
Yeah, so it's a privilege to, you know, there one very positive element of art storytelling is that you can potentially leave people with a conversation, you know, or something to think about, you know, provoke something. It doesn't always have to be just the movie's over, is that a thumbs up or a thumbs down, you know. Yeah. Like beyond that, beyond like or dislike, if it can make some people reflective or engage someone else in figuring out their own thought process and their feelings on things, and that's sort of, other than entertaining people, that's pretty much the ambition of storytelling.
Especially with a movie like this, it's about some of the social issues, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's one of the things, you know, usually when you hear about, you know, crazy cults or something that's happened, you think, oh, there's people are nuts. But, you know, what you're trying to do is sort of humanize it in a way, because it's, you know, there is a reason why people get wrapped up in these
things. And people don't join a cult. You know, people didn't sign up to commit suicide. It leads to that point. So, and I think that what leads them to that point is what's the interesting stuff, because it's so hard to imagine how could it possibly happen. And I think that it's important for a lot of people to think about, like, how could that possibly happen, and then to maybe educate themselves on why. No matter what your opinion on it is, certainly subjective, but it's certainly something worth, you know, thinking about.
Yeah, well, and a cult isn't the same thing without a charismatic cult leader, and you found a fantastic one. And I believe you said you found him from a Louis C.K. episode?
Yeah, I was watching an episode of Louis and he played a pharmacist, and I was like, that's the guy, which of course, if you see The Sacrament, is like the most absurd story of how I found him, but he had such a screen presence, and it's a ridiculous scene, a very funny scene, but when I saw his screen presence, I was like, well, one, he's got this amazing screen presence, and two, he obviously has a sense of humor because he's in Louis C.K.'s show, and I think Louis is a really interesting person, so if they could collaborate, even on a small scale, certainly I would be able to get along, it should be fine. Then I tracked him down and I had him he put himself on tape and did a quick audition, and maybe a quarter of the way through it, I was like, this is clearly the guy. And it's really like one of the sort of treats of this movie is going around and exposing everybody to, oddly his name is Gene Jones, which is like, how could that possibly be true? But, you know, to be able to expose new audiences to someone who, like, they just don't know about.
Yeah.
And he just comes in and it's like universally across the board, everyone is like, oh my God, where did this guy come from?
It was such an education for all of us, us and for him, you know, for us to, living in this sort of like indie art world that we had for so long, to see someone come in that's been making a living as a character actor for so long, come in and with a high degree of professionalism and a very detailed plan of attack with, you know, the beats of the script. We've talked about before the big scene, the interview scene, and before we shot that, the night before we shot that, Ty and I had wrapped for the day, and Gene had gotten to town, and the three of us went into my hotel room with the idea of, okay, well, we're going to try and work this and figure out where we're coming from. It's a huge scene. Well, how are we going to break it up? Let's see what we need to work on. We did it one time, straight through. And we're like, okay, well, good. And for Gene, who is amazing and in no way is at all like Father, other than being a fascinating human being, Gene got to see us coming at it from a place of the way that we do things is sometimes non-traditional, and it was fascinating for him to see that there are friends that are working on these movies, and there's this sort of way, a language in which we operate with one another because he hadn't experienced it. So it was an odd coupling and in a really positive fashion.
Yeah, and there's one particular scene I think that went on. There's I forget how many pages of dialogue, but he did it in one take.
Yeah, I mean it's set in the middle of the movie. There's a big interview scene between AJ and Gene, and it's really the anchor scene of the movie. And it's Gene's first time in the movie, pretty much. And it was a 12-page scene, which is nearly we did it in one day, and that seems to be impossible. Everyone thought we couldn't do it, and has 200 extras. I mean, it was just like a massive undertaking of a scene to do. And I remember we said, okay, Gene, you're going to come in here, they're going to clap, and you're going to go sit down. And, we'll try it, and we'll see how far you get. And then we'll figure it out. And so basically what I was saying subconsciously was like, well, when the wheels fall off, we'll stop, and then we'll figure out how to fix it. And so the first take, we just were like, we'll just wing it. So we're just like, okay, you come in, sit down. And so action, he comes in, the crowd goes crazy, he sits down, does 12 pages out, which takes 17 minutes from the starting to the end when he leaves. Doesn't drop one line. And all of the crowd reactions, which are incredible, were natural reactions. I was like, eventually we'll tell the crowd to react, but first let's just see. They just did that. And what was so fascinating is that they're reacting to this speech that he's making, and as actors, it's great because they're reacting in places where I'm like, this is perfect. But then also, I couldn't help but think like these people who don't know what the movie's about are reacting to this stuff that this cult leader is saying, like, well, he's making sense. And so it was a really weird experience to be like, A, this is great creatively, and B, this is really terrifying to see how quickly these people are thinking like, well, what this guy's saying, this charismatic guy is making sense to me. It's like, that's how people get interested in it. So, but I remember that when he came in and did that take, and when he walked out at the end, AJ and I looked at each other like, we're going to be fine.